Welcome to Without Boundaries, a podcast from Russell Investments. We're here to talk with the people behind the portfolios, the active managers from all asset classes who shape how markets move in the real world, and who help us improve financial security for investors around the globe. I'm your host, John Eggins, Head of Portfolio Management here and a Russell Investments lifer of 23 years. We know that the best ideas don't just come from a single source. That's why we look far and wide, spanning markets and asset classes around the globe to find the most compelling managers and insights. Welcome to Without Boundaries, where we meet with some of the world's best investors. And today, I'm actually really lucky because I'm reaching outside of Russell Investments boundary to meet with Matt Hudson here in a really sunny, beautiful Boston day at the Wellington headquarters. And so thank you, Matt, for joining us.
Oh, it's great to be here.
And this one's kind of special for me because for years I ran our global equity funds, and so we've partnered together for well over 10 years.
Yep.
I think you now run about $2.5 billion across your global and your international strategies for us.
Correct.
And correct me if I'm wrong, we helped seed or lead off one of those strategies for you, didn't we?
You did, actually. So I started running global equities for you guys first.
Yeah.
And then a little over 10 years ago, you said, you know what, we love the style you run the money, but can't really find anyone that does it internationally quite the same way. Would you ever consider doing it? I said, I'd love to. It'd be easy enough. It's kind of a subset somewhat of doing global.
Yeah.
And we did an incubation product, got it underway. The performance looked good, and there's been no looking back ever since.
Great. Yeah, it is just a subset. So like I said, special to be here. Thanks for hosting us, and thank you for the partnership and helping our portfolios on the global and international side over the years. We're going to talk a little bit about your portfolios, how you run them, as we get through. But to start with, I wanted the audience, we've known each other a long time, but I wanted to get the audience to know you a little bit. So maybe we'll start with, how did you get into the industry picking stocks?
So I've always been fascinated by the markets. When I came out of undergraduate in '91, it was actually the recession. Tried to get into banking, mutual funds, couldn't find a job, was losing jobs to MBAs because they were willing to take the same salary. So I took a financial analyst position and went back to graduate school. And then coming out of graduate school and the job search, answered a physical ad in the Wall Street Journal looking for a securities analyst at Pioneer Management here in Boston. And I was one of, I think they told me a couple thousand applicants, and 3 of us got hired out of that process.
Wow, a physical ad.
Physical ad.
I bet you have analysts who don't even know what that is now.
Some of them don't know what a newspaper is, let alone a physical ad.
Nice. Either there or elsewhere, were there any really important early influences or mentors on what shaped you as a stock picker? So
my first manager there, a guy named Mark Madden, who ran their international fund, later went on to build a big emerging market product at Oppenheimer Group, was really kind of one of the first mentors that I had. And 2 reasons he was interesting. One, when I talked with him in the interview process, his first question was, so what are you invested in? And I told him I had, some stocks and some mutual funds personally.
Yeah.
And it wasn't much. I was, coming out of graduate school, and he's like, okay, that sounds good. He goes, you told me you had nothing personally invested, that the interview would have been over. Because as an investor, you need to have your own skin in the game and know what it's like to win and lose, what it's like to take risk. And it was just an important part of the process for him as far as picking investors that he wanted to work with. From a professional standpoint, once I had the job there, the interesting thing with emerging markets was he was on the growthier side, and because in emerging markets, it tends to be basic industries like finance, commodities, a lot of banks, a lot of industrials, that he's really one of the first people who taught me to kind of look in different places for growth, because there wasn't a lot of tech, there wasn't a lot of healthcare, consumer, the things you typically think of as growth stocks, there was less of them available in emerging markets. So it just gave me a good background and kind of thinking of what a different definition of growth really is.
Staying on the personal front, what do you like to do in your free time when you're not reading the Wall Street Journal for job adverts?
So a few things. I'm an avid golfer.
Okay.
I wish my handicap was better, but I do love to play. I just don't get to play enough. Rabid Boston sports fan. I grew up here, so you name the team, I'm engaged. And then on the lighter side, if I'm trying to relax, it's actually cooking and drinking red wine. And I like to experiment with wines from all over the world, but especially wines from the West Coast and California.
Oh, nice. Okay, and then a big feature of how you run money is you go and meet companies. So you've traveled all over the world. What's your favorite country to visit for work?
So I think Japan, which I've actually been going to the longest, is one of my favorite countries to go for.
Okay.
Most Michelin star restaurants of any country in the world in Japan.
Okay. Oh, and you just reminded me, you mentioned West Coast wine. You have a connection to a winery in Seattle, in the Washington State area as well. Russell is a Washington company. So is there a favorite from the Washington State area?
So there is. It actually melds two things. So Drew Bledsoe, who used to be the quarterback of the Patriots, started a winery out there. His most famous wine is called Doubleback, which is great. I think it's highly rated. And I actually had dinner with one of your colleagues, Jordy McCall, one of the times I was in Seattle, and he brought a bottle of Bledsoe's wine, a different one, to the winery, and then after the dinner I ended up ordering a case when I got back to Boston.
Okay, so that really blends the love of sport and the love of wine.
Perfect mix.
Perfect mix. I love it. If it's okay, I want to go back to investing. So you talked about your mentor and finding growth in unusual places, perhaps. Can you maybe talk a little bit about the investment philosophy and approach you've developed here at Wellington? So how do you think about picking stocks, building portfolios?
Yep, sure. So and it's interesting, and I've been doing this process even really before I got to Wellington. I was also at American Century and then Pioneer before that, which I already mentioned. So my big overarching theme or definition is not what is a growth stock, but when is a growth stock. And what I mean by that is all through different periods of time, there's different industries, different sectors, stocks that lead markets, because not everything is growing at the same time. So obviously, in the last couple of years, AI has been really the big theme. But in the past, it's been healthcare, it's been commodities, it's been energy, it's been industrials. And really at a base level, what we're doing in our bottom-up research is we're looking for stocks where the growth is inflecting and accelerating. And so we're focusing on that second derivative of growth, where you could be growing 5%, then 10, then 15, or you could even be minus 15 going to 0 to plus 10. And the reason I love the philosophy so much is it lets you invest across sectors, industries, countries. While we will have a tilt towards your typical growth segments, technology, healthcare, consumer, it does get us involved in banks, industrials, commodities from time to time, because at any point in time, those are indeed growth stocks when their earnings are accelerating.
The average active manager has really struggled the last couple of years, and a big part of that has been the extreme market concentration. And many managers have struggled through their own process to own the big Magnificent Seven names, and that's something that's not impacted you quite so much. So your performance has been really quite strong the last couple of years, and you do have a portfolio that does feature some of those names as well. So from a process, from an acceleration perspective, and even from valuation, how have you been able to get comfortable with some of those names when many other investors have not?
Yeah. So the one interesting thing and one philosophy I've always lived by is, when you find a good growth stock, the one thing that people perennially tend to underestimate is duration.
Okay.
And so, and I can't speak to how other people run money, but I could imagine, there's a few people say, oh, the stock has doubled, I've made my money, I'm going to sell. Or, okay, the earnings are $2, I think it's worth 40 times earnings. It hit my target price, I'm going to sell. A couple of things we do differently. We don't set hard target prices because earnings are a moving target depending on the fundamentals of the company. And also the other big thing for us is valuation is secondary. So as long as earnings are growing strongly, accelerating, that the multiple is not too disparate with the actual growth, we're fine holding that stock. So, we don't pay much attention to absolute multiple.
Yeah.
It's really multiples relative to, what the growth rates are. The other thing I would say is every industry is slightly different in how you analyze it. So, for example, semiconductor equipment, it's more backlog, right? By the time it shows up in revenues, it's usually too late. So you're looking for the acceleration in the backlog, maybe not necessarily in revenue. If you're looking at retail, same store sales are usually a good tell of where earnings are going to go. We'll look at M&A, we'll look at management changes. Anything that's fundamental that will lead to an acceleration in earnings keeps us interested and engaged. And then once we own the stock, it's perennially meeting the management teams, upgrading our earning estimates, And it's really building that comfort. So when you get moments in time, so for example, this year, the DeepSeek in February, or President Trump's Liberation Day in April, that if you get these sell downs, you have the conviction in your numbers and your thesis that you're actually able to add on those dips as opposed to sell, which is what I think, some weaker hands that may be thematically owning these stocks but don't really know the fundamentals all that well, and so they get shaken out when the exact wrong time when they should actually be adding.
If it's okay, let's talk a little bit more, like stay on the AI theme for just a little. So you have pretty good exposure across the AI supply chain. NVIDIA is one of your largest holdings, and so I was wondering if you could talk about how and why you've retained conviction in that name, but then maybe talk more broadly, where are there sort of opportunities and threats across the broader landscape?
So the biggest opportunities so far have been more on the semiconductor side, right? So NVIDIA, AMD, Avago, TSMC, like all the AI starts with the compute. So you can't obviously do the AI with the compute, and that starts with the chips. And the one super interesting thing about AI is it's going to permeate everything. This will be, and I know other people have said this will be the largest probably technological change since the cell phone or the personal computer. Like, it's going to be that impactful both from a business standpoint and in consumers' everyday lives. But there's an entire food chain, and you've seen it, everything from utilities have outperformed in AI, right? Because you need power. That's been one of the bottlenecks. Obviously, semiconductor. Then there's the hardware. There's all the servers. There's the data centers. There's the construction companies that build the data centers. Then, of course, there's the cloud companies where the compute's going into. And then, of course, there's software and then the end users. So there's really an end-to-end supply chain that AI permeates through. And we're trying to find the best positioned companies within that is where we've made our investments. So like I said, for now, that's mostly been in the semiconductor arena. We do own other names like Schneider in France, which does a lot of the electrical components that go into the data centers, and that's obviously benefited from this AI boom. Interestingly enough, one of the things that's starting not to benefit is software. So especially in the last couple of months, there's been this narrative out there, well, AI is going to be able to do everything and software is going to lose, and so maybe companies will stop spending money on software.
Built in-house? Or
built in-house and or third party. And they'll basically do everything through OpenAI or one of these AI models. Search is another thing, right? So Google, under constant pressure, are you going to open ChatGPT as opposed to opening Google to find the answers to questions? Now, we've talked to Google about this. They say, and their search growth actually accelerated last quarter. They don't see it. Obviously, Google, when you open the search page now, they have an AI answer that's there. So time will tell whether that proves to be a false narrative or not. But for now, they actually seem to be doing okay. So it's a fast-moving arena. There's definitely going to be winners and losers. And a lot of the time we're spending is, where is that money going versus not going? But we're still in the first and second inning of this. Like, we're still in the build-out phase till we get to the usage, right? So the early usage is going to be more on the expense side, right? So using AI agents, right? So you don't have to have as much call center staff, coding within companies, so you're leading less programmers. So right now, AI is more of a cost opportunity than a revenue opportunity, but that revenue opportunity will come. It's just a matter of time before it gets here.
I feel like we could talk about this topic for hours.
We could.
Especially with you. But you said something important earlier. You said it's not just what is a growth stock, am I getting the quote right, but it's when is a growth
Correct.
stock. And so there are other areas where you see opportunities at the moment as well. So I was wondering if you could talk about other sectors, other regions where you see some opportunities. We've talked about Europe and defense stocks in our calls before. So yeah, we'd love to hear other areas that are seeing some of that acceleration.
Sure. So besides AI and tech, which obviously we own a lot of, aerospace and defense has been a big sector for us. So there's a few reasons. Obviously, Ukraine and Russia, which has been going on for a while now, increased conflict in the Middle East. But the other big thing was, and this goes back to macro and political, was Europe agreeing to move to 5% of GDP on defense spend.
Right.
And so that will benefit all the European defense primes and some of the US ones, but the goal is to spend Europe first. And then the other piece on aerospace is, just as you know, when we came out of COVID, it became more about experiences than goods, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
people couldn't travel,
Yeah.
they were locked down. It's imagine, we're talking about COVID 6 years later. And so, but the manufacturers, so Boeing and Airbus, and we own Airbus, Boeing's had a lot of issues, although it seems like they're slowly getting their act together. They made so many layoffs during COVID because the business basically shut down and air travel shut down or was greatly diminished, that it's taken 3 to 4 years after the fact for their supply chains to get back up and running. And now you're finally starting to see deliveries accelerate because they're actually slowly getting back to full manufacturing capacity. And so you'll see, Airbus, I believe their order book is more than 10 years. So you're going to continue to see, as they continue to ramp production, really strong earnings growth. And then, from Airbus, you have names like Safran, which do, engines and parts. You have GE in the US, and then there's a bunch of other names kind of in the food chain. So that's an example where nothing to do with AI. It's basic, huge demand, big supply chain problems from COVID, and now demand is back, and they're still trying to catch up with that demand over the next few years.
So the party's just getting started. I want to just try a little game here that gives a sense for your willingness to take risk, if that's okay. And that reminds me of your job interview all those years ago. You got to have risk on the table,
Yeah.
right? So a couple of questions for you, and I just want you to say one or two things: either play it safe or take a chance. So we're going to go through them. The first one: would you take a polar plunge in the Charles River during the winter?
I would take a chance.
Take a chance.
100%.
Nice. I did the duck tour recently. Apparently, it used to be one of the dirtiest rivers in the country, and now it's one of the cleanest. Is one of the facts.
It's
You still
clean.
do it?
I don't know how clean, but it's clean enough.
Take
Let's
a chance.
put it that way.
Would you make a TikTok with your kids?
So I have done that somewhat half unknowingly. So the answer would be yes. Take a chance.
Take a chance inadvertently. Got it. Would you ride in a driverless car through the Boston streets?
So having grown up in Boston and knowing just how bad Boston drivers are, it can't be any worse. So I would do it.
Take a chance.
Take a chance.
Would you go swimming in Cape Cod after a recent shark attack alert?
As long as there wasn't a seal nearby, 100%.
Take a chance.
Take a chance.
You said you play golf. If you're stuck in the trees, do you chip out or do you go for it through the trees?
So most people would chip out. I would go for it through the trees. And that goes back to that risk reward of you might get it right 6 times out of 10, 5 times out of 10, 50%, but it feels awfully good when you get it right.
You haven't played it safe once, mate.
No.
And so the final one, you've been to Japan a lot. So have you ever eaten a blowfish from a restaurant there?
I have eaten blowfish. As you know, you need a license to actually cut it in Japan because it's poisonous, and if you cut it the wrong way, you can actually kill someone. But it's delicious.
It's delicious. So eat a blowfish, take a chance, play it safe.
I've already done it, so take a chance.
Thank you, Matt, and thanks, Wellington, for hosting us here today. It's been a really long, productive partnership that's really been to the benefit of all our shared clients. Thank you again.
It's been great. I'd do it anytime.
Thank you.
Well, mate, that's our show for today. Remember, in your personal life and your investing life, keep breaking boundaries.
This podcast is intended for informational purposes only. The content provided within the podcast should not be construed as investment advice, research, or a recommendation, solicitation, or offer for any specific Russell investment or other product, strategy, security, or service. The information does not take into account the investment objectives or circumstances of any particular investor and may not be appropriate for all investors. All investments carry a level of risk and do not typically grow at an even rate of return and could experience negative growth. Any past performance results should not be seen as a guide to future returns. All opinions presented are as of the date of the recording and subject to change without notice. Information contained within the podcast is obtained from sources believed to be reliable but not guaranteed. Reliance upon the information provided in the podcast is at the sole discretion of the listener. The general information contained in this publication should not be acted upon without obtaining investment advice from a licensed professional. This podcast may involve discussions with non-Russell Investments personnel. The views and opinions expressed by non-affiliated personnel in this podcast are those of the speakers and do not reflect the policy or position of Russell Investments or its affiliates. This content should not be construed as a recommendation or endorsements of any third-party manager featured on the podcast. Some of the portfolio managers or firms featured in this podcast may manage funds or accounts that are offered by Russell Investments, and they may have business relationships with Russell Investments or its affiliates. Neither Russell Investments nor any of its staff accepts any responsibility for or liability with respect to the information or opinions contained in this publication. In EMEA, this content is suitable for professional clients only. Capital at risk. Copyright 1995 to 2025 Russell Investments Group LLC, all rights reserved.